here. Well, there you have a lovely little bit of music to start us off. That's Parts and Spare. It is Jordan by Leah, and it's an undiscovered artist. And once again, I'm delighted to say hello to everybody here. This is the Sustock Plans Chat Club, where we discuss AI innovations and ethics in marketing. Delighted to be in Dublin, which is lovely to be here in Dublin in TUD. TU Dublin is hub of incredible entrepreneurship and stuff going on. We have Alex Gibson here with us. Alex is a distinguished figure in the digital marketing education and innovation space. Digital marketing discipline head at the School of Marketing and Entrepreneurship at TU Dublin. And of course, I think Alex, you're a research fellow at TU Dublin's Enterprise Academy, where you lead is an exploration into virtual world. And of course, you've got your own podcast, been running for many years now, and it goes out on Dublin City Radio, Dublin City FM radio, and you've been doing that for a quarter of a century. Called The Persuaders. Alex, greetings.
Yeah, lovely to see you, Paul, and welcome back to Dublin. We're separated virtually, but we're actually very much in the same building. But I think it works better on the on the split screen. Yeah, when you say it like that, a quarter of a century, it really makes me feel old. But of course, I was a teenage prodigy, clearly, when I started
yes,
that.
Good man. So a teenage prod, that's what we call it. Very good. Well, look, we've got a busy session, and I'm going to be asking you about some of your work about return on immersion, which is something you came up with several years ago, but it's actually cutting edge still today. So I'm going to ask you about that. But of course, Alex, jump in on any of the topics. We have some really, really important stuff to cover today, and we say hello to all our friends out there. It is we're going to be talking about OpenAI listing works and tasks that will be eliminated, or they say will be eliminated. We'll make a quick reference to Deloitte's big error that they made during the week with their AI usage. But then we're going to get into the shock stuff, which is the religion of AI and AI personhood. Beware of that. And of course, suicidal bots in Gaza, and the petition to stop AI taking over the world. Now, this is not science fiction. This is very real stuff. But because we're interested in the application of business and marketing, this is where Alex will step in and give us the ROI, return on immersion stuff, which is from the virtual world, which we're very interested in as innovation. And then we're going to finish with two beautiful positive pieces, which is Mo Goldat. We've had Mo on before. We talked about his stuff before. An incredible guy. We'll give you more background info, but he's talking about happiness in this world of AI. And it's lovely stuff. And then we finish with Jane Goodall's famous last words. Now, this is the stuff that will make you sit up and listen. We'll only spend a couple of minutes on it. We'll point you to where everything we talk about, we'll list the links on prsmith.org/blog. And then we'll mention a video documentary that's being released at the end of the month in Westport, in part of their festival over there. It's from a documentary about Ukrainians refugees living in a beautiful part of Mayo. And it's quite moving and quite beautiful. It's called Safe on Sound. And we've supported that documentary for over a year. It's taken 2 years of filming, and they finally made it, and they're launching at the end of the month. So we'll just quick mention of that at the end. So for now, let's just kick off with OpenAI releasing a list of workers or work tasks. It says that ChatGPT can already replace. Now, this is a piece by Victor Tangerman, who writes for Futurism, which is a very interesting source of information. And he says that ChatGPT has released a new evaluation dubbed GDP-Val to measure how well its AIs perform on economically valuable real-world tasks across 44 occupations. And, it's basically kind of looking at this drastic cost-cutting measures that seem to be the dominating factor, but some of them are already starting to backfire for several companies. Now, there's mixed opinions on whether it's succeeding or not, but I did talk about last week 95% of AI, generative AI pilot programs were failing, and that was the Massachusetts Institute of Technology research. There are others that are saying, well, no, some of them are more effective than that, but what Victor Tangerman actually says is that there's a good reason to take OpenAI's latest evaluation results with a massive grain of salt. We've already seen the use of AI cause major headaches for software developers, lawyers, and even customer service representatives. So, over human rights issues or even more serious stuff than that. Now, we'll be talking about Deloitte having to pay a lot of money back to a government department in Australia because of some hallucinating AI. And we know that's been going on for some time. But what GPT or kind of OpenAI have kind of been saying, that this new evaluation proves that, the 44 occupations, AI could have the highest impact on real world productivity, including a litany of professions, including real estate agents, social workers, industrial engineers, software developers, lawyers, registered nurses, customer service representatives, pharmacists, private detectives, for goodness sake, and financial advisors. And it says it's going to just knock these for six. Well, the jury's out. Alex, I don't know if you kind of would agree that it's going to wipe them out altogether, or do you think this?
I haven't seen the actual report, Paul, but yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I was at a graduate recruitment fair here in Dublin during the week, and just asking some of the companies that were there and their sense of it. And my sense is that from a graduate recruitment point of view, there's already a degree of caution out there in the marketplace. There were slightly less companies, and they had less visible presence. The size of their stands was a bit smaller. So I think there's around graduate recruitment, which is possibly a bellwether, a litmus test of some of this, there's already a certain degree of caution. And that was one of the factors that people were saying to me, was that a lot of these the big companies, particularly the big accountancy consulting firms who would have recruited, even in a small country like Ireland, their numbers of recruits are in the hundreds every year. They're taking a cautious approach, because they're looking at some of the professions you mentioned there, the legal profession, some of the software development. That's a big revenue stream for these type of companies, as you know. And I think they're really assessing, particularly at entry-level jobs, how many of those roles and what graduates are doing could be done more productively using AI. So it's very real, the challenge. I mean, it's not something that I think is abstract for a few years. We're already, as I said, getting a little bit of a sense of it in the graduate market already.
Wow, Alex, that's great. You're talking from the coalface there of how real this is. So that's quite shocking. More shock, Deloitte and their AI mega error refund. So you may have heard of this in Australia. Deloitte Australia will issue a partial refund to the federal government after admitting that artificial intelligence had been used in the creation of a report, which they charged $440,000 Australian dollars. That's nearly $500 million. And it was littered with errors, and it included 3 non-existent academic references. I mean, this is outrageous. And a made-up quote from a federal court judgment, for goodness sake. Who do you believe anymore with the sources of information? Well, I think it does tell us that we need to double-check a lot of AI-generated stuff. Staying on this, have we lost the faith? It makes me think of religion and the religion of AI, in a sense. Now, this is a piece that I think is quite shocking. It's written by Bart Fish, and he published it on LinkedIn. And again, we'll put the links to everything we talk about. We'll put it onto the show notes that we put on puresmith.org/blog. And the religion of AI, in Bart Fish's mind, is the religion of AI is a deeply rooted issue in techno-optimism. That's the word, really, techno-optimism. And this techno-optimism is this belief that technology and progress should not be limited or regulated in any way. That technology alone can solve all human problems, even while the biggest problems are being ignored. And this kind of cult of innovation that Bart Fish talks about, I tend to agree with him, uses the equity of past inventions to try and legitimize general AI. And that's a bit naughty. So they're saying things like, oh, calculators and the printing press and the internet and social media, these things have little to do with AI. But the toolmen and salesmen of AI are using them as examples of inevitable progress. But I would say it's not quite the same sort of progress we're talking about. And the inevitability is a religious tenet. That's what they're kind of saying. The singularity moment, this idea of AGI kind of suddenly taking off and dominating the world. That singularity moment being a future event that is supposedly inescapable and assured. And I would subscribe to that. So AGI, artificial general intelligence, has become a rapture-like event, something one simply believes in. And a kind of salvation is promised to those who embrace and use AI. So the believers will have their abilities amplified while the skeptics will be left behind. This is a kind of fire and brimstone kind of narrative where AI religious leaders claim millions of jobs will be replaced. AI, well, you were saying that as well, Alex, we're kind of seeing a bit of that, where AI could become sentient and destroy the planet. I'm not sure about being sentient, but I think it could destroy the planet. And this fear serves to both inflate the perception of AI's abilities and valuations and force adoption. And, it's kind of a marketing tool. So fear is a great motivator. And Sam Altman, do you know what? I think next week I'll talk about what Sam Altman has said are the 3 greatest risks, and it's shocking to hear him talk about it. Yes, yet he's kind of propelling us into it. Sam Altman once wrote on his blog, "The most successful founders do not set out to create companies. They're on a mission to create something closer to a religion." Yep, I'll repeat that. They're on a mission to create something closer to a religion. And at some point, it turns out that forming a company is the easiest way to do so. So Altman knows exactly what he's doing, says Bart Fish. Now, Bart Fish mentions Peter Thiel, and we've talked about Peter Thiel before. And Peter Thiel is doing religious lectures on the Antichrist and how, in his view, tech regulation, liberal concerns for society are the greatest evils in the world. And this quote, I'm going to leave you with this quote on this topic. This quote from Leo Strauss, one of Thief's main source of inspiration, is very telling. And it is this: because man is by nature evil, he therefore needs dominion. But dominion can be established. That is, men can be unified only in a unity against other men. What? What kind of a cult is this? So we can't ignore Thief's extremist right-wing politics, his religious beliefs, and his tech billionaires beginning to believe that they've all embraced authoritarianism and, the oligarchs that I've written about, we've talked about. It's a progressive movement, one that, in my opinion, demands regulation, tolerance, and democracy. Are we losing the fight here, Alex?
Well, very interesting philosophical perspectives, Paul. I mean, I think at the level of educators, we are articulating some of those discussions and debates, and the ethical framework around which AI is being used is obviously on our agenda. It's one thing that we want to disseminate as a perspective from students, rather than purely the technical how to embrace it from a technical perspective. But I would say we're all struggling here. The speed at which this is evolving, when you match that against the sort of structures that we have in education, which are kind of pretty linear and they're pretty structured around, as you know, Paul, a framework that is 3-4 year programs, etc. How we actually embed AI from a technical point of view, and how we at the same time inculcate an ethical framework for students to think about this is a real big challenge for us. I mean, certainly on one of the things I look at in terms of when we're developing courses, etc. But it's the pace at which this is changing is so challenging, and it's the reskilling, upskilling of our educators is another big area. I just don't think there's enough time or resource being put into that at the moment. If we're serious about developing an ethical framework around students, and also technically, we just need a massive investment in terms of the educator community, in terms of AI.
We do. I mean, I'm saying to this group, 2 master's groups I'm dealing with, doing a Sustac masterclass here in TUD, and I'm saying to them that they really need to ask questions and need to be discussing this stuff. And, it's one for everybody to discuss, and it's philosophical, yes. You can't separate AI from philosophy or politics, for that matter, or geopolitics. They're inseparable. So it's something we just have to keep pushing to learn more and not allow it to happen around us. That's the wake-up call to get involved, stand up, sign a petition, and so on. I'm going to talk about a petition later on.
Yeah, no, I would support that. Sorry for cutting across you, but I would, even on my LinkedIn profile, I use the word evangelist for immersive tech, and I kind of what you've said has caused me to reflect a little bit. Even using the word evangelist is, aligning it to the sort of religious zealotry that you so elegantly critiqued there a moment ago. So maybe I do need a bit of introspection myself, whether I do want to be seen as an evangelist, because evangelist kind of it's actually really interesting what you've said, kind of reflecting on, if you're an evangelist, have you really an open enough perspective to this thing, but you see this all the time, people talking about tech evangelists, etc. And it uses the language of religion.
It does.
Doesn't it?
I often wonder, people get so excited by it. I'm saying, but why are you Sam Altman, why are you so excited about AI? Why are you so excited? Why is everybody so excited? They say, because this, because that, it's changed. But really, is it just profits and growth and domination? Is that why they're so excited? They're not really talking about what it's doing for the world very much, and they need to talk about that a bit more. Something else to be weary of is AI personhood. And this Yale Law Journal is publishing on AI personhood. And there are actually groups advocating for ChatGPT's feelings. So we're back to philosophy again, Alex. We've talked about video showing fake AI characters and avatars in movies demanding that they weren't born. You've made me suffer pain because I'm in a fake movie about pain. I'm not a real person, but I'm feeling pain. My life is full of pain. Kill me and start me off again, sort of thing. And I'm wondering if we are really speed running from AI can't count reliably. I'm wondering about AI deserving constitutional protection without stopping at maybe fix healthcare first. I think this is more than this, than the religious stuff kicking in here. This personhood, saying AI is a person and deserves human rights, and I just don't buy it at the moment. So I'm saying, and it has been said by Rebecca Boltzma, who writes some great stuff, that Microsoft is actively developing AI companions with memory, personality, emotional responses, all the features that these are listed, could be creating dangerous attachments. He then writes that essays don't get fooled. It's not real, but then is promoting how powerful these things are. They're seemingly conscious, and they've got emotional responses. And in fact, if you look at my LinkedIn page, you'll see a poster in New York that's been graffitied because it's saying, talk to this bot, he'll be your friend, he cares, he listens, he's almost sentient. And they're not, but we're told they'll be not. Now, people have been passionate about it. So why should they have legal personhood frameworks? I don't get that. But they're saying, I seriously hope we don't reach the point where caring about silicon souls is more important than human ones. That's where we could be.
I don't know have you read Clara and the Sun? I don't know if you read that by Ishiguro Kaziguro, I think is the right name. I'll check it afterwards for the show notes. Won the Booker Prize, but it's just a Japanese novelist, and I read it a few years. It's just brilliant. It describes exactly what you're talking about, where Clara is in a post-apocalyptic world where our only friends are robotic AI avatars. In fact, they're robots, but they're AI generated, and it talks about the rights and a really profound questions in terms of, does this robotic AI entity have rights and feelings and sentiment, and how should it be protected? Definitely recommend it. It's called Clara and the Sun. Yeah.
Oh, great. You give us the full reference, and if you message me, we will post that in the notes. That'd be great, Alex. Thank you.
So I'm just looking at Kazuo Ishiguro. Yeah, he won the.
Thank you.
It was a Booker Prize winner, I remember. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to turn to one of my favorite writers and journalists out there, Carol Cadwalladr. And forgive me, Carol, if I mispronounce it, but I'm a big fan of yours since your TED Talk I saw many years ago changed my whole perspective of marketing and technology and AI now. And she used to write for The Guardian. She was sacked over, well, won't get into that, but she's just a wonderful writer, and she's now formed a new group called The Nerve. I'd recommend it's worth a read and a subscription or subscribe to it. But Carol reckons that we've got 3 years to stop the oligarchs from controlling everything. And then she says Maria Ressa, the journalist and Nobel laureate, reckons it's less than 3 years before the oligarchs can take over. So time is against us on standing up. And her post talks about the Great Trust slide deck containing the proposed Gaza, with the Elon Musk smart manufacturing zone in Palestine, Gaza, Trump Riviera and islands in Palestine, the American Data Safe Haven in Palestine, the AI Irish Egypt, whatever that is. And so this kind of overlaps with this continual sort of deregulation, control, tech companies coming in. It's kind of frightening. It's kind of slipped under the radar of the negotiations that we're all hoping will be successful. Keep an eye on Nikki Petrosi's and her relentless videos that are posting against bots like Character AI and all other dangerous bots. And she's highlighting the dangers of these things. These are deregulated completely and causing kids to, in some cases, commit suicide. It's just horrible. Carol's second talk, which we'll put a link to, the first one was about how Cambridge Analytica helped Donald Trump and Brexit win first time around, but her second one is even more chilling. And she's had a hard time since she did those talks. But that brings us on to the next Red Lines petition. I wanted to mention this. It's a petition for AI red lines. And this is only for influencers. So if you're an influencer, take heed of this. We're going to post a link to this, but it's 9 former heads of states, 10 Nobel laureates, including Geoffrey Hinton, that we've talked about many times, and other AI pioneers and thought leaders, not necessarily advocates or religious leaders, but they're interested in the importance of having red lines and regulations, and they have a petition to say that we must have an international agreement of regulations and limits that you cannot cross in AI by the end of 2026 to prevent the most severe risks to humanity and global stability. Now, there's kind of AI-driven delusion. And we've seen it manifest itself in early glimpses, such as suicide with teenagers and complete hallucinations with Google when they launched their Bard, wiped $100 billion off their stock market value. So we've seen some mistakes and dangerous stuff it's doing. But humanity now faces escalating risks, from engineered pandemics to large-scale disinformation to global security threats to systematic human rights abuse to loss of human control and oversight over advanced systems. So hundreds of millions of people already rely on advanced AI systems, and leading AI developers are indicating that their latest models are approaching dangerous capability thresholds. Now, Sam Altman himself says this, and next week I'll talk about it and show you exactly what he's saying about it. So there is a petition. We're going to put the link down there, and it's for those kind of influencers we mentioned to actually sign the petition and say, we need regulation. We demand regulation. Now, Alex, I'm sorry, we've gone a bit over time, but I'm dying to ask you about ROI, the return of immersion, so the return of investment on immersion, or your virtual world. What's all that about? I think what we'll do, if it's okay with you, we'll ask you back next week if that's okay to do more on this. But let's just open up the discussion now with a little bit. What is this return on immersion?
Well, people who know me know I have a huge interest in immersive technology. Just briefly, what that is augmented reality, virtual reality, extended reality, 360 video. So I penned an article for a blog, just thinking of trying to put down a little flag myself as something that I could hang my hat on and do a little bit more research on. So I came up with the idea of ROI being return on immersion, and looking at the whole perspective on, well, people who invest in this from a company perspective, what are the returns for them? And, I'm thinking particularly around things like business context and consumer context. What is the payback from investing in this technologies? And there's been quite a few studies, Paul, around this, looking at how putting people into immersive spaces helps meet certain business objectives. I mean, one area that interests me hugely is using virtual worlds for training. So, and companies are starting to embrace this more and more. So creating virtual spaces whereby employees can interact with each other, typically in the form of avatars, but they can also share information, particularly because it's 3-dimensional rather than this call that we're on right now, which is 2-dimensional. But in many instances, the 3-dimensionality adds an extra important dimension to making something real. Obviously, in certain types of training, like fire safety or maintenance of aircraft or whatever, you can immediately see the benefit of being in a 3D space.
Well, how would you measure the 3D stuff then?
Yeah, so the thing that I'm looking at myself speculatively is things like, under my perspective of return on investment, would be things like dwell time, eye tracking, how much time people spent interacting with each other. It's by its very nature, it's a medium that has zero distraction in it, in the sense that you and I are, well, we're obviously totally focused in our conversation right now, but perhaps some of the people watching us aren't, they're kind of in the background. And so the 3-dimensionality of keeping people in the space is of interest to people from training. There is a lot of evidence that shows that retention of information when it's done in a three-dimensional way rather than two-dimensional is significantly higher. I'm not going to bore you with various, but there's research that's been done by PwC in conjunction with a company called Tailspin, where they looked at learning environments in virtual reality and compared it to typical classrooms, or which is at one end of the spectrum, or what we're doing here, which approximates to an e-learning environment. And they found that, for example, VR learners were 4 times faster to train and 275% more confident in applying their skills than those who had learned in an e-learning environment. Obviously, it's more expensive than doing e-learning. So that what you're looking at there is, can you get it to a certain scale, and then it becomes less costly. In terms of advertising and marketing, Snap will be the big company in this space, who were early adopters and innovators in that. We all familiar with the filters, where you can change you can put a hat on your head or glasses or change your makeup style, etc., which is at one level might appear quite gimmicky, but they're actually working with very big brands, from L'Oreal to BMW, for example, not just about makeup brands, to allow people to create augmented reality experiences that showcase a brand. And again, their research shows that the levels of engagement they're getting are up to twice as high as traditional digital interactions. Again, I think common sense would indicate that that's probably the case, because by its nature it's interactive. Typically, a lot of it has you doing something. The nature of these things, if I put a funny mask on my face, a virtual mask, asking me to share, I'm probably going to share that with my friends, etc. So this shareability dimension is really proven to be very strong, and that's why a lot of brands are flocking to companies like Snap, who've been really big performers in this space. They know that audiences, particularly younger audiences, I mean, that's another dimension to all this, of course, Paul. Like you and I have a certain vintage, but when you look at three-dimensional virtual environments like Roblox, which most of people viewing this possibly don't have a Roblox. It's very much targeted at the sort of 12 to 16-year-olds. But I've seen some amazing statistics that your Roblox user is typically 3 to 4 times more engaged in a Roblox than the next medium that they have available to them, which is YouTube Shorts. In other words, they're spending a lot of their lives in these environments. You and I probably just aren't even conscious of that. But the brands who want to succeed with those audiences as they get older, they're just going to have to embrace it, because the reality is that people who've been in these virtual environments for so much time, they're not easily going to be persuaded to switch to digital, some of the traditional, if I can call it that, digital formats.
So digital, yeah, gotcha. Alex, we've got to get you. Are you okay for next week, or maybe check your diary later and let me know? But I would love I'd love to hear more about this stuff.
More background on that, and I'm also interested in, from your audience's perspective, Paul, people who work in this space, AR, VR, what have they done? Could they share with me? I'd love to find out, maybe do some research. I know I've contributed a bit on your book already previously, but like to, maybe you and I collaborate a bit more, particularly anyone watching who's interested in immersive tech and business. Love to talk to them.
Definitely. We'll do that. And you saw the Ryder Cup, they trained the European team with 3D virtual immersion for the abuse they were going to get from the crowd while hitting a ball.
They probably stole that idea, by the way, from Walmart as a celebrated case. Walmart have over 200, can you believe this, 200 training centers in the US, okay? Second biggest employer in the US after the Postal Service, okay? And they've 200 training centers, and they bought 16,000 headsets. Just think about the numbers here, 16,000 headsets to train people who are about to work in Walmart stores. And one of the things that they train them on is Black Friday and what it's like to be in the middle of a Black Friday.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, wow. They put the headsets on. They filmed at an actual Black Friday using 360 cameras. And then it's only a small part, but a part of the training to give them a sense of what that would be like. So I suspect maybe the European golfers got their idea there. You never know. How to deal with hostile crowds.
Absolutely. Hostile customers, hostile crowds. Absolutely right. Yeah. Look, it's just about, we've got 1 minute. So I'm going to skip Mo Goddard's happiness and do that next week. I promise we'll talk about that next week. I'm going to finish with Jane Goodall's last words. Now, this was posted by Philip Berker. And it's recorded by Netflix. And this is a series that's been recorded. So the renowned primatologist and conservationist, Dr. Jane Goodall, died sadly on the 1st of October, aged 91. And Jane was a famous conservationist and a chimpanzee expert. And a new Netflix series called Famous Last Words, where they interview celebrities who agree that the conversation will not be released until they've passed away. So she said, and she put her She said she'd put Musk, Trump, Putin, and Xi on one of the Musk rockets and send it off and wave goodbye. She said, but she did say quite seriously into the camera, she's an amazing lady. She said, remember at all times, you're here for a reason. Do not give up. Never give up. No matter how tough things get, never give up and always keep hope. Now, the Emmy winner, Brad Falchuk, who's the brainchild behind this series, and he interviewed her. He's the guy that produced American Horror Story. It's weird kind of stuff. But he said about Jane, he said that she was fearless in all things. And she was always that way. And he said she is one of the world's greatest and most beloved champions of good. Isn't that a wonderful thing to say? So it was clear to me, he said to me in our conversation, that she was approaching her final adventure with the same fearlessness, hope, and humor and joy that she approached everything else in life the same way. So famous last words, one to watch out for. And he says, if you watch 3 minutes of anything this week, watch the 3-minute excerpt from Jane Goodall's last words. I'm going to post it in the chat show notes on prsmith.org/blog. Okay, we'll talk more next week about the documentary that's finally been made safe and unsound. We've got time to talk about that next week, so we'll do that next week. Alex, my apologies, but we've run out of time. We'll have to continue the conversation next week. Great to see you. It's lovely to be here in TU, Technological University Dublin. It's full of enterprise and full of interesting people. Really enjoying being here. We'll play this out now with Parts and Spare, the lovely local band, yet undiscovered, from my street in Elthorne, in Hanwell, Elthorne Avenue in Hanwell. And here's Parts and Spare. It's a really nice little track. It's called Jordan by Leah. And we'll play it out. Alex, thanks very much once again, and see you next week. Cheers. They sealed off the building. Now they're looking for a crime, and I'm out here taking pictures. I'm just trying to feel alive. This guy sells dreams for place him at the front of the line. Can't you stop when you cry? Fire with your eyes. There's a light on the side, and the call came through tonight. See,